Dividend payouts versus reinvestment, what you need to know about the VB ETF. Today we're diving deep into the world of small-cap investing with a popular player, the VB ETF, or the Vanguard Small-Cap ETF. The VB ETF tracks the CRSP US Small-Cap Index, giving you exposure to a basket of promising small companies with big growth potential. But before you jump in, there's more to the story. We'll explore how VB hunts for these small-cap winners, how it handles its cash flow, and answer burning questions like, does it pay dividends? So buckle up, ETF enthusiasts, because in the next few minutes, we're cracking the code on the VB ETF. Question 1. What is Vanguard Small-Cap ETF? There are actually several ETFs offered by Vanguard that target small capitalization stocks, but the most popular one is likely the VB Vanguard Small-Cap ETF. Let's break down what this ETF is and how it works. What is a small-cap ETF? An ETF, exchange-traded fund, is a basket of securities that trades like a single stock on a stock exchange. A small-cap ETF specifically focuses on companies with a small market capitalization. This market cap refers to the total value of a company's outstanding shares. Small-cap companies typically have a market cap between $300 million and $2 billion. VB Vanguard Small-Cap ETF. Objective: VB seeks to track the performance of the CRSP US Small-Cap Index. This index measures the investment return of small capitalization stocks listed on U.S. exchanges. By owning VB, you're essentially investing in a slice of many small companies. Management: VB is passively managed, which means it follows the holdings and performance of the underlying index, CRSP US Small Cap Index, instead of trying to outperform it through active stock selection. This typically results in lower fees compared to actively managed funds. Performance: as of April 2, 2024, VB has a price of $228.57 and offers a trailing 12-month return of 7.52%. It boasts a tight bid-ask spread of 0.3%, indicating high liquidity. Benefits of Vanguard Small Cap ETF. Diversification: VB provides exposure to a broad range of small companies across different industries and sectors. This diversification helps reduce risk compared to investing in individual small companies. Low cost: Vanguard is known for its low-cost ETFs, and VB is no exception. The expense ratio, annual fee, of VB is very low, which means more of your returns stay in your pocket. Growth potential: small-cap stocks typically offer higher growth potential than larger, more established companies. However, they also come with higher risk. Question 2. What is the objective and strategy of the VB ETF? The objective of the VB ETF, Vanguard Small-Cap ETF, is to track the performance of the CRSP US Small-Cap Index as closely as possible. Let's delve deeper into this objective and the strategy VB employs to achieve it. Objective: tracking the CRSP US Small Cap Index. CRSP US Small Cap Index. This is a market capitalization weighted index that represents the performance of a specific segment of the U.S. stock market, small capitalization stocks. The index includes companies that meet specific size criteria, typically having a market cap between $300 million and $2 billion. Strategy: passive management. VB uses a passive management strategy to achieve its objective. Here's what that means. Holdings mirroring the index: the fund managers of VB don't actively research and select individual stocks. Instead, they strive to replicate the holdings of the CRSP US Small Cap Index. This means VB holds the same stocks in approximately the same proportions as they exist in the index. Rebalancing. The fund periodically rebalances its holdings to ensure they continue to align with the weightings of the underlying index. This process buys or sells certain stocks within the portfolio to maintain the target weightings. Benefits of passive management for VB. Lower fees. Passive management generally leads to lower expense ratios, annual fees, compared to actively managed funds. This is because passively managed funds don't require a team of analysts actively researching and managing the portfolio. Transparency. The holdings of VB are readily available and transparent, as they directly reflect the holdings of the CRSP US Small Cap Index. Question 3. What are the top holdings within the VB ETF, and how do these align with the fund's investment strategy? The holdings of the VB ETF, Vanguard Small-Cap ETF, constantly change as the underlying index, CRSP US Small-Cap Index, adjusts. However, we can discuss how the top holdings typically align with the fund's investment strategy of passively tracking the index. Top holdings example. While holdings can change, here's an example of some top holdings you might find in VB. Builders FirstSource Inc., BLDR. PTC Inc., PTC. Targa Resources Corp., TRGP. Axon Enterprise Inc., Axon. Entegris Inc., ENTG. Alignment with investment strategy. These top holdings align with VB's investment strategy in the following ways. Market capitalization. Since VB tracks a small cap index, all the holdings will be small capitalization companies. The holdings you see above would typically fall within the $300 million to $2 billion market cap range. Index weighting. The weight of each holding in the VB ETF portfolio reflects its weight in the CRSP US Small Cap Index. Even though the holdings listed above are examples, they would likely represent a larger portion of the VB portfolio compared to less valuable small-cap companies within the index. VB doesn't pick winners. It's important to remember that VB doesn't aim to pick the best-performing small-cap stocks. Here's how this aligns with the strategy. Passive management. As discussed earlier, VB passively tracks the index. The fund managers don't actively research and select individual holdings based on their growth potential or other factors. Diversification across industries. The top holdings will likely represent various industries within the small-cap universe. This aligns with the strategy of providing broad diversification across different sectors of the small-cap market. Question 3. What is the expense ratio of the VB ETF, and how does it compare to similar funds in the market? The expense ratio of the VB ETF, Vanguard Small-Cap ETF, is 0.5% as of April 2, 2024. This is a very low expense ratio, making VB a highly cost-efficient way to invest in the small-cap market segment. Understanding expense ratio. The expense ratio is an annual fee charged by the fund to cover its operating expenses, including management fees, administrative costs, and marketing expenses. A lower expense ratio translates to more of your investment returns staying in your pocket. Comparison with similar funds. Industry average. The average expense ratio for small-cap ETFs is around 0.25%. This means VB is significantly cheaper than the industry average. Other small-cap ETFs. Here's a comparison of VB's expense ratio with some similar funds. iShares Russell 2000 ETF, IWM 0.19%. SPDR SP 600 Small Cap ETF, XSC 0.20%. Schwab Small Cap ETF, SCHA 0.07%. VB's competitive advantage. VB's low expense ratio is a key competitive advantage. Here's why. Lower costs, higher returns. Over time, a lower expense ratio can significantly impact your investment returns. By keeping costs minimal, VB allows investors to potentially capture a larger portion of the underlying small-cap market's growth. Vanguard's reputation. Vanguard is known for its commitment to low-cost investing, and VB exemplifies this philosophy. This attracts investors seeking cost-effective exposure to small-cap stocks. Question 4. How liquid is the VB ETF, and what is the average daily trading volume? The VB ETF, Vanguard Small-Cap ETF, is considered a highly liquid ETF. Liquidity refers to how easily you can buy and sell shares of the ETF at a fair price. Here's how VB demonstrates good liquidity. Tight bid-ask spread. VB typically maintains a tight bid-ask spread. The bid-ask spread is the difference between the highest price a buyer is willing to pay, bid, and the lowest price a seller is willing to accept, ask, for a share of the ETF. A tight spread indicates active trading and allows you to buy and sell VB close to its fair market value. High average daily trading volume. VB has a high average daily trading volume. This refers to the number of shares that are typically bought and sold on an average trading day. A high volume indicates strong investor interest in the ETF and translates to easier buying and selling of shares. Question 5. What is the turnover ratio of the VB ETF, and how does it impact potential capital gains distributions? The VB ETF, Vanguard Small-Cap ETF, has a relatively low portfolio turnover ratio. This ratio measures how often the holdings within the ETF are bought and sold. Here's how the turnover ratio impacts potential capital gains distributions for VB investors. Understanding turnover ratio. Active versus passive management. Actively managed funds tend to have higher turnover ratios as they frequently buy and sell holdings based on investment decisions. Passively managed funds like VB typically have lower turnover ratios because they aim to replicate the holdings of a specific index and don't actively trade. Tax implications. When an ETF sells holdings at a gain, it may be required to distribute those capital gains to shareholders. This can happen even if the investor hasn't sold any shares themselves. VB's low turnover and capital gains. Low turnover. As of April 2, 2024, VB has a portfolio turnover ratio of around 14%. This indicates that the ETF holds its assets for an average period of around 0.1 years, 1/0, 14. This low turnover minimizes the realization of capital gains within the fund. Reduced capital gains distributions. Due to the low turnover, VB is less likely to generate significant capital gains that need to be distributed to shareholders. This can be beneficial for tax-conscious investors who want to avoid unexpected tax bills from capital gains distributions. Question 6. How does the VB ETF allocate across different sectors and industries? The VB ETF, Vanguard Small-Cap ETF, tracks the CRSP US Small-Cap Index, which means its allocation across sectors and industries is primarily dictated by the composition of that index. Here's a breakdown of how this works. Passive management and index weighting. Passive approach. VB employs a passive management strategy. The fund managers don't actively decide on the sector or industry allocation. Instead, they aim to replicate the holdings and weightings of the CRSP US Small-Cap Index. Index weighting. Each company within the CRSP US Small-Cap Index has a specific weight based on its market capitalization. The larger the company, the higher its weight in the index. VB allocates its holdings in proportion to these weightings within the index. Sector allocation example. Since the holdings of the CRSP US Small-Cap Index change constantly, it's impossible to give a definitive breakdown of VB's sector allocation. However, here's a general example of how the allocation might look. Technology. Technology is often a dominant sector in small-cap indexes due to the high growth potential of many young tech companies. Healthcare. The healthcare sector is another area well represented in small-cap indexes, with companies developing pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and biotechnology. Consumer discretionary. This sector encompasses companies selling non-essential goods and services, and it can have a significant presence in small-cap funds. Industrials. Industrial companies involved in manufacturing, construction, and related activities might also be well represented. Other sectors like financials, materials, energy, and utilities could also be present, but their weightings might be smaller. Question 7. How sensitive is the VB ETF to changes in interest rates and economic conditions? The VB ETF, Vanguard Small-Cap ETF, is likely to be more sensitive to changes in interest rates and economic conditions compared to large-cap stocks or bonds. Here's a breakdown of why. Interest rates and small-cap stocks. Financing costs. Small-cap companies often rely more on debt financing than larger, more established companies. When interest rates rise, borrowing costs for these companies increase, potentially impacting their profitability and stock prices. VB, which holds a basket of small-cap stocks, can be negatively affected by rising interest rates. Growth versus value. Small-cap stocks are often categorized as growth stocks, meaning their value is tied to future earnings potential. Rising interest rates can make future earnings less attractive to investors, potentially leading to a decline in small-cap stock prices. VB, which is heavily invested in growth-oriented small-cap companies, can be more vulnerable to this effect. Economic conditions and small-cap stocks. Economic sensitivity. Small-cap companies tend to be more sensitive to economic cycles than large-cap companies. During economic downturns, consumer spending and business investment typically decline. This can disproportionately impact small companies, leading to a decline in their earnings and stock prices. VB, which is invested in a basket of small-cap stocks, can experience greater price fluctuations during economic recessions. Risk tolerance. Investors in small-cap stocks generally have a higher risk tolerance compared to large-cap investors. VB reflects this inherent risk, as its price can be more volatile due to its exposure to small-cap companies. Comparison with other asset classes. Large-cap stocks. Large-cap companies are generally more established and have greater financial resources to weather economic downturns. Therefore, large-cap stocks tend to be less volatile and less sensitive to interest rate changes compared to small-cap stocks. Bonds. Bonds are generally considered less risky than stocks. They typically offer more stable returns and are less sensitive to economic fluctuations or interest rate changes.